¿Qué tal?
Bien, ¿cómo estás?
Muy bien, ¿y usted?
Bien, por dicha.
We missed you at ISS in Colombia.
I know. How was it?
It was good. It was good. Should I do the intro in Spanish?
Whatever feels comfortable for you.
I've been practicing.
Good.
Bienvenidos a Firme Physiology. Tenemos un episodio muy especial. Especial como el sábado gigante. ¿Es el sábado gigante?
Sí.
Sí? Okay. I didn't know if it's
Por
just a
supuesto.
Mexican.
No.
Okay.
Pero es antiguo.
Okay, well, now you got expectations. We set the expectations. Tenemos un episodio muy especial porque tenemos a Catalina Fernandez. She is a sports dietitian from Costa Rica, and she's joining me here today to talk about her experience with athletes and her professional role, how she got to where she got to, and also talking about sports nutrition in general and how athletes can best fuel, and also how coaches, practitioners, and nutritionists can help their athletes perform their best. So, Catalina, nice to see you.
Bueno, muchas gracias por tenerme por acá. Thanks for having me. Hola y bienvenidos a todos. Hi everyone. It's happy to see you again. So I'm very excited to sit down and chat with you.
Yo también. Y también mi sueño es para hacer este podcast en español. Un día, ahora, no, porque mi español es como mierda. Pero un día es mi deseo. Entonces vamos a hacer otra vez, pero en español.
Súper,
Pero
me gusta.
ahorita es como un poco Spanglish y English.
Okay, love it. Because I don't get to practice English as much as I would like to now, so I'm happy to do this in English too.
Okay.
Or be
All right.
jumping back and forth, it's fine.
We can do that too. Oh, let me ask you though. Okay, the name Firme. ¿Conoces la palabra firme?
Yeah.
Like, okay. All right. I didn't know if that was a Mexican thing too. Because when we were talking in Barranquilla when we met last August, we were talking about like some different words, like way. I thought way was just a Spanish word, but like, no, that's a Mexican word.
Mexican, totally. And here in Costa Rica, it's may. May is like way in Mexican or for the Mexicans.
Okay. So you the firme, it translates.
Yeah. Well, I mean, firme here is like steady. Like
steady.
Firm. Mm-hmm.
Does it have the connotation of like, for example, if you see like a low rider, like, oh, that car's firme.
No.
Do you use it like that? No? Oh, okay.
No.
Yeah.
That is not.
Okay, yeah, that's the connotation here, like, oh, something that's cool or like badass or like, oh, that's firme. That's hella firme.
I know. It's like firme is something that is like rigid, like firm, like steady.
Okay. Yeah. My hair product is Suavecito. Do you have Suavecito?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's firme. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Learn something new every day. Just like I learned how there's no tortillas in Colombia and no tortillas in Costa Rica either, right?
No. Yes, there we have corn tortillas, but we have rice. Like we are going to prefer rice over tortillas, but we do eat a lot of tortillas, especially in some areas of the country. Yeah. But yeah, we do. Yeah. Not as much as for Mexico, but yeah, we do.
Colombia, they were kind of hard to find.
Yeah? Oh, no, it's easy in here.
Okay. Yeah. Well, again, thanks for doing this. It's nice to see you and talk to you.
Nice to see you again.
Like I mentioned, we met last August in Barranquilla, Colombia with the Motion Sports Nutrition. It was their first international sports nutrition conference. I might be getting the official name and title wrong of the conference, but I think that's what it was. Yeah, so I got to meet you and some others that I'm gonna talk to as well because I enjoyed your guys' talks and your experience and all that. So, um, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? You are, like we
Sure.
alluded to, from Costa Rica, but I'm interested in how you got into sports nutrition as you were coming up.
Sure. So I've always been into sports since very young, which is funny because none of my parents are actually like athletes or anything more than very committed, disciplined people. But growing up, especially my dad was very keen to like show us or talk to us about all different sports. We had all different types of balls and equipments growing up, and it was a very active childhood. But I always had that thing in me about competing. So when I was in my school years, I was part of all the different sporting events that I could participate. I was very looking forward to like to belong to a team. So I remember we had a sport called kickball. I don't know if you have it, but it's like baseball, but you kick the ball instead of throwing
Oh yeah,
and hitting
kickball.
it with a bat. Yeah. It
Yeah,
was big. It was big when I was in school. So I was in the team and we started competing against other schools. I had my first uniform. I remember I have pictures of me taken with my uniform because it had my last name on the back. So it was like the first time of really belonging or feeling like I belong. And after that, like I was very committed. I wanted something to be serious and stuff. And my school was not very supportive, kind of like school. So moving to high school, I'm a very tall person for being a Costa Rican. I don't remember in I can tell you meters. So I am 180, and
I have no
that's
idea
like
what that
six
means, but I've
something.
stood next to you, so yeah, you're pretty tall. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was 15, I was already this height, and it turned out that my aunts from my dad's side of the family, they did play volleyball and were part of the national team. I wasn't really aware until I was older. So my cousin was there playing for like our city, San Jose. So he was like, "Hey, are you involved in anything, or do you want to come and come and like play with me in this team?" And I got there, and he was like, if suddenly you got to the place that you were meant to be your whole life. And from that point on, I played volleyball for the national team and for my university and for my city for more than 10 years. And I loved it each and every day. Well, not every day, but I loved the fact of being an athlete. And it was while being an athlete, and I was very fortunate to be part of probably the best generation of volleyball players, female volleyball players in the country, in the history of the country. So we got to qualify to 2 World Cups. We went to Pan American Games, which is very high for a team sport in our countries. So during all those years, of course, you're sitting and playing against the best volleyball players in the world, right? In the US, amongst them, right? And so when we got to those tournaments, I started asking myself, like, why are we like the team who lingers at the table? Why are we the team that eat all the different desserts and the other ones are not eating these? Why are other teams bringing some food? Like, I was asking myself questions about the connection between what we ate and the performance or even the way we look, right? And because I grew up an athlete and my classmates from high school weren't, I used to eat a lot. And when I mean a lot, it was a lot, right? And and I've always been like I'm long and actually like very lean. And some of my best friends in high school developed um, some issues around food. So I was like, why do I look this way? Why they're not? Like, why do I have this amazing relationship with food? Or why do I eat a lot? Why do they throw up and skip food? And so all those questions it started when I was in high school. So I was like, I need to find the answers. And I decided I wanted to study human nutrition, which here in Costa Rica, being a nutritionist and being a dietitian is kind of like the same. We don't have the difference that guys have in the US. So I'm a dietitian and a nutritionist. We here call it nutritionist. So yes, I went to school, did all my 6 years that we have to do here in human nutrition. Never really get to see anything about exercise. So it was until my final graduation project that I wanted to do something that involved sport nutrition, which again, none of my professors wanted to work on a topic like this. I ended up working with a professor in the human movement school. And from there on, my my thesis, my graduation project was to see the effects of an energy drink in the performance of volleyball players. We did an experiment. I did to experiment with my teammates and friends, which was pretty fun. And then this professor, he encouraged me to go to all these different international conferences where I get to meet some of the best sports nutritionists or dietitians in the world. I asked them how I could continue my path in sports nutrition. And we're talking about years ago, when before COVID, before all these virtual experiences and all these virtual access to all this education abroad. So the International Olympic Committee had at the time an international program. It's a diploma of 2 years. So I get to take that. I went to the US. I did my master's in the Ohio State. So that's how all these started and build up to what it is. Yeah.
And so did you have like the idea of becoming a sports dietitian or a sports nutritionist? Like when did that, I know you had the interest in the questions, so you want to study it, but when did that, like as a career option, set in for you? Because like you said, and you even mentioned this when we met, is, you know, the area of sports nutrition in the US is very different than some other countries like Costa Rica and some of the Latin countries in terms of emphasis and focus and funding and things like that. So when did that set in for you?
I think it was since the beginning, right? When I started the human nutrition program, that's what I wanted, and I was looking forward to it. When I went through all the clinical stuff, the community stuff, the food services, I was like, this is really not for me. Like, this is not my scene. This is not what I see myself. I want to participate where I've grown up. I've grown in the athletic environment, in all these different games, in all these different tournaments. This is where I want to be. I want to be like on the other side, even providing what I never had, because I didn't have this support or this follow-up when I was growing up being an athlete. And I always promised myself that I wanted to give back what I didn't have. And I was part of the Olympic movement and the Olympic cycle in the different tournaments that we went. So Central American Games, Central American and Caribbean, Pan American Games. So working at the Olympic Committee here in Costa Rica was always kind of like my dream, and it was what I was looking forward to. So I was like the different student in my school, because I was like the only one who wanted to focus on sports nutrition at the time. Again, it wasn't developed here at the country as it is now, but again, here I think that sports nutrition translates for many people to just making muscles grow and changing body composition, and not really. I like to say that I work in the sports nutrition for performance, right? For sports performance, not physique, not fitness, not body modifications. It's for performance per se, and that makes it like very different in the objective or like the focus that you're taking.
Yeah, that's a big distinction. That's something that I talk about with students because, I'm in exercise science, exercise physiology area, not nutrition, but I do talk about nutrition. Mm-hmm. And, making if you're talking about sports nutrition, that's very, very different than, like you say, body composition nutrition or weight loss nutrition or health nutrition. Now, obviously, if you're working with athletes, you want them to be healthy too. But, even from like a macronutrient standpoint, like a carbohydrate standpoint, I mean, you can't approach an athlete and a non-athlete the same way.
In the same way, no. Yeah. And I mean, there are concepts for healthy people around sugar, around sodium consumption, about amounts in general that for the general population and active people who are just trying to be healthy, you want to take down sugar and we want to have calories controlled and sodium controlled. But if you're going to be working with athletes, sugars might be one of your best friends at a specific times, not all the time. And your diet might be high in sodium too, because you need it, because you're sweating a lot. Calories are going to be like sky high compared to the healthy population. So yes, the focus, and again, it has to be seen, and I love exercise physiology, and I think that sports nutrition is based, and you need some information in sports physiology to make everything really make sense in terms of the strategies that are being used. And it's all about seeing food in their functional ways, right? Because I mean, sugars, its energy is very easily digested, and it's going to be available in your muscles, in your brain, that you need it, especially when you're training, that your digestion is being limited because blood flow is in your muscles. So it's all about understanding the physiology and understanding the function of the nutrients to see why you need in these cases for these people, very specific, special people that are putting their bodies in, all these situations where they take their body to a limit that it's needed.
Right. Yeah. In our grad program, we have an exercise nutrition and performance class, and typically it's taught with one of us. I've been teaching the last couple of years, and then a nutrition professor, and we get both our exercise science students, and then also we get nutrition students. And for a lot of them, actually pretty much like all the nutrition students, this is really the first time they're getting like a big discussion on exercise metabolism and like exercise adaptation and, fueling needs and this and that, and understanding, looking beyond just like, okay, what are the recommendations, right? It was like, why?
Exactly.
Like why does someone need, pre, post, or intra workout or performance carbohydrates and protein and anabolism and protein synthesis and the underlying stuff that's going on with adaptation? A lot of the nutrition students, I'll get like, this was really useful because we never talked about this. And now the recommendations, like why we're doing stuff with certain athletes, make sense.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it happens the same way here. And I think as a student, and I don't know if it's about us students or maybe the system, like it's all about knowing the amount. So you have this condition, you use this amount. You have this, you use this amount. And for me, there's not really a lot of learning there. And every time I work with athletes too, I try to do a lot of education, telling them exactly what's happening in their bodies. Why do you need these? You just finished like a very long, intense workout. So what happens to your body? What do you use? What's not there? What's broken or not? And then in terms of nutrients, what's going to work for each one of these things that just happened? Because it makes sense and it's easier for you to remember and to really make the whole point really. I don't know. I feel it's easier to understand why and not just follow instructions.
Yeah. So who and what type of athletes have you worked with? Because you mentioned Olympics and things like that. who not maybe like specific names, but like what type of athletes and levels, or you want to mention some names, that's cool too. But like who have you worked with, or what types of athletes have you worked with?
So after I came back from my time in the US, it took a while, like 6 months or so, or even almost like a year. But I started working at the Olympic Committee. Again, it was my dream job at the time, and I was so happy to be able to really come in and fulfill this space that was not really making the most out of it. They just started having nutrition. I feel like it had like a very clinical emphasis before, and this side of the sports dietitian on the field, seeing different training sessions and doing things out of the office was like different for them. But it was like the movement, it was trying to be installed by the interdisciplinary group that we had at the time. So I started working at the Olympic Committee. It was only me when I started, and I had to develop the nutritional department. And at that time, I had to work with all different athletes, and all of them belong to me, right? So I've worked with weightlifters, triathlon, cycling, gymnasts, bowling, surfing, shooting, you name it. But after some years that I think I was really able to show the importance of sports nutrition and the impact that it had in performance, I started asking for volunteers and students and having interns, and that ended up opening like job postings, right? So we ended up being 3 dietitians working for the Olympic Committee at the time I was there, full time. And we get to like divide the sports a little. And mostly I can tell you that it was almost 7 years that I worked with the Olympic Committee. I worked mostly with boxers. So it was boxing, cycling, especially mountain bike and road cycling, triathlon, and I did work with the female soccer team, and yes, mainly. So yes, and especially with male boxing, well, boxing in general, but boxing and cycling, I think it was my main sports. And then after that, and after I finished at the Olympic Committee, I worked with a soccer team as well here in first division. That it was very interesting for us. Soccer is our main sport in the country. It's very popular. It's like where all the attention and money and funds and everything goes to. So it was very different for me to move from the setting of the Olympic movement and all these different sports, and like where you have the Olympics in as a goal, to work with these footballers and in a club. That again, it was really a very nice experience, and what we were trying to do, it was working since they were little, since the younger ones. And but again, very different settings.
And so the Olympics just happened, right? So
Yeah, it's like the happiest time every 4 years.
so then you were responsible for like the nutritional aspect that your Olympic team sort of
Not
has,
now, not now. I worked
but you kind of built it
until,
up.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so working on the Olympic Committee, it work. I mean, it revolves around the Olympics, right? That's the main goal. It's like at the end of the road, that's what you're looking forward. But Olympics happen every 4 years, and each one of these years, there's like a regional competition that it's advancing to get to the Olympics. So the first year, like, okay, Olympics are over this year. So next year that we start an Olympic cycle, we start with a very regional, small competition that is called Central American Games. So it will be like the Olympic Games, but only in Central America. We have a lot of athletes competing here. The level, it's very low. I mean, it's regional, it's low, but we have a lot of athletes. Like when I worked on the Olympic Committee, we went with, I don't remember if it was like 600 athletes. So it's a lot of people. Then the second year, it's like you start opening the map. So the second year we moved from Central America to the Caribbean. So it's Central America, but we have countries participating like Mexico and Colombia and all the Caribbean islands. Then the third year is Pan American. So you keep opening the map. So it's like the mini Olympics for all of the American continent, right? So South, North, and Central America. And the fourth year, again, we get to the Olympics. So each year we are working to get athletes to all these different games. Again, since the beginning of the 4 years, we're working to, or we have identified some athletes that are going maybe, or we're working towards getting them to the Olympics. But each year you have to go through all these different games. It's very different. Again, it starts very broad in terms of the mass of people that you're taking to Central American games, but the level is very low. Then you get to the Olympics where the level is like the highest level, and you get to work there with very, very few athletes, like from 600-700 to like 15 or 20. And each year you have priorities and you have to work with the priorities, even if it means the sport or specific athletes. Then as a dietitian, you also have to be involved with feeding around these competitions. In the Central American games that I get to participate, we were staying at hotels, not the village, because again, for Central American games, you're not going to be in a village for this, right? So it was mainly hotels. So you have to be in charge of looking and talking with the providers too, talking with the hotels, coming up and developing the menu for those weeks. That again, it's like 2 weeks. For that time, the organization was not providing any type of snacks, only the 3 main meals. So we had to set up a specific budget to be able to buy from us, from the Olympic Committee, the specific snacks that we were going to provide to all the different athletes. That had to go through us, the dietitians. I asked for help, and I did have help that time with 2 dietitians that worked with me at the moment. It was in Nicaragua, so it was in the country next to us. So we went with some cars, and we had cars available. So we were actually the ones, again, that were setting the list to buy all the different snacks, and we wanted to be like personalized. So not all the different sports receive the same. According to your sport, we personalized the type of snacks that we were providing. We had to go and pick fruits, for example, that don't have like a extended life. So we were shopping for fruits frequently. Some other things we like bought like a whole bunch, and we had in the hotel that we had a whole room being clear of all the furniture to be used as storage of all the food, and all the distribution was going through there. And then when you go also to these competitions, you have athletes participating on different schedules, and some of them, like for example, taekwondo, they spend the whole day in the venue. So we had to send food to venues as well. So like the whole food service setup for the hotels, and to be able to send to all the venues and all the athletes. That logistic again was there's a lot of things going on. So a lot of logistic and planning happening, plus the individual work that you're doing with athletes, with boxers, for example, because it's a weight class sport, you have to be on top of them the whole time in terms of seeing where they are in their weight, the different changes that we need to be addressing. If it's gonna happen through a little bit of dehydration in the last moment, so how much is tolerable and healthy. So at these games, you have to be addressing the nutritional strategy from all different sides. And then once you start building it up towards the Olympics, and you're, for example, in the Pan American Games or the Olympics, you have the food being provided by the organization. So you have, before that, you don't really mess up with plans, and you don't have to sit down and plan the whole menus, but you do have to ask the organization for the menus before and to see what's going to be provided. And if everything is going to be friendly in terms of allergy, in terms of the variety of foods that you're going to be having, or if you're going to be needing something else. If an athlete needs something else that is not on the menu that's going to be provided, then we had to take it. Supplements is something that, as the Olympic Committee, because of the whole doping control, that we were in charge of providing the supplements that were third-party verified and stuff. So we were in charge of taking these supplements with us as well. So it's very different moving across the Olympic cycle and the competitions across the Olympic cycle, and the amount of logistic planning and the strategies from the dietitian sport was the standpoint that we need to do.
No, I think that's good, because I think if you're like an aspiring sports nutritionist or something, it's way more than working with athletes. Like you mentioned, like all the logistical stuff and the organizational stuff and all that sort of thing is beyond how many carbohydrates does this individual need.
Yeah. Yes, and I had help at that time, and I was very thankful with a dietitian that works here at the Costa Rica Institute of Sports, that she has a lot of experience in terms of budget and buying food, because it was the first time, because we had to, I mean, the money was literally put in our bank accounts, and we had to start working with the money and getting all the bills and all the things together and having that order too, to be able to present it back. So it's not like you go with the grocery store that you're saying like, I'm gonna buy X amount of X, and no, it's for a lot of people, and the logistic of the amount you need and how many people is in each one of the disciplines of the sports, and how many for how many days they're competing, because all these different games, they go around for 2 weeks, but there are athletes that are going to be there for like 3 days because they compete only one day and then they're gone, or they are going to be competing for almost the 2 weeks. So the numbers that you have to be doing for that, it's not only creating the list and going to the groceries, it's planning a lot of Excel sheets and counting and using math. It's useful. Yes.
And how about working with the athletes themselves? Because I'm sure like that's a very specific type of person and a very specific type of population. But what's it like working with like such elite level athletes, including like at the highest level of competition in the Olympics? Like, what are some challenges? What are some unique things? Like, are there similarities? Are there differences between some of the sports? Things like that.
You know, it's different being in an institution like the Olympic Committee. It's different from like the regular public that you're looking forward to go to a dietitian and you're willing to pay, and you are the one who says, okay, I have these needs, I'm gonna pay, I need someone. Like when you go to the doctor, right? But when you're working at an institution like this one and you're gonna be part of the games as an athlete, you might never heard of nutrition before. You might not even think that you need it. You might think that you're doing everything correctly, or it's not even going through your head that there's something that it has to be done with what you're eating. So when I was working at the Olympic Committee, and they would be like, okay, so maybe road cycling. Well, no, because road cycling, you do really need that nutrition, but bowling, right? So the bowlers, they're a priority because they might win a medal. So you have to work with them, because everybody that probably, and it's with the people who run all those numbers, might win a medal, then it becomes a priority for the Olympic Committee, and we have to work with them. So when you approach them, it's that you're offering something that's not maybe considered or not even wanted by the athletes. So you have those examples, or you do have the examples of athletes wanting to work and even be asking to work with them, and probably they're not a priority. So it's like, sorry, I cannot really work as much as you want to. So yes, there's a lot of, it's a whole spectrum from athletes who don't really care and think that they don't need anything and don't want to hear anything from you, all the way to athletes who are fully committed, completely focusing on working in every detail. But again, if you're working with very elite athletes towards the Olympics, and most of them are very conscious about the importance of working with all these different areas, not only nutrition, but with psychology and with having their physical therapy in place and stuff. So it's easier with them. With the other ones, I cannot say it's not easy, but there's a lot of like buying in to get them involved. And with some teams, you have to be working with them collectively, not individually. And again, it's not only one strategy. You have to approach each team, each different sport, according to what they're used to, their needs, their culture. So every time you approach a sport is a lot of talking, seeing, and learning, even with coaches too, because there are coaches who are very open to show you everything, tell you everything, and work with them, because you're entering as an intruder for some of them, right? Because you are from the Olympic Committee, you're not from the federation or from the sport per se. So again, it's mainly out of the personality, the culture of each one of them. I can tell you that I had a very good experience working with boxing. At that point that I worked with them, the coach was very open to work with me. And you know how these, or if people don't know about the weight class category sports, it's a very complicated environment, because it's that you compete according to your weight. And the day that you're competing, you have to go into an official weigh-in where the officials have to check your weight. That means that it gives room to a lot of myths and not the best positive practices around controlling your weight, and a lot of issues around how to manipulate your weight to be able to get to the weight you need for the competition day. And the culture around these sports, and I'm not sure in the States, but in here they tend to be, at least boxing, sometimes in terms of the social educational level, it's not so high. So it's a complicated environment. And I was very fortunate to have coaches who were very open to work with me, because they get to practices like having the athletes not eating anything for days, not drinking anything for days, just eating lettuce, for example. And you're getting to a competition, which is the most important part, maybe, or the most important date in your whole year, and you're not eating for like a week or just lettuce for like a week. Of course, you're not going to get there in the best shape or in the best state. So I was able to enter the world and be able to change some of the practices. There was some resistance from the athletes who have been doing these for years, and I've been doing these for years, and it's the way I get to the weight cut. And why do you come in here and tell me I have to do this different, right? But yes, boxing, I was very fortunate. Mountain bike, I was very fortunate to be integrated as a part of the staff, and it's easier. Again, you really are grateful for these spaces. And in some sports, where you're not so required, not so welcome, it's As trying to see is part of this is not taught in high, this is not taught in college, but how to start building conversations, how to start making your way in at some point in the sport. So there's a lot of personalities, a lot of different, again, cultures. I think it's the best world. So it's learning that you cannot use the same strategy with all of them and all the time. You have to be creative.
Right, right. Yeah, it's the same way. I mean, I'm not super familiar with boxing or even, things like MMA, but I do know that similar to what you were mentioning, the weight cut practices are crazy. Fluctuating, 10 pounds or some significant percentage of body weight going into a competition. Like, I understand, like, if you came up like that and that's just what you do, but hearing about that, I was like, that's terrible for your performance. Dehydrated, no energy, loss of muscle mass, as well, and just even the bouncing in terms of just the mass itself is that's one thing that strikes me as could be super improved upon if the weight was approached in a more efficacious type of way, which seems like you got the opportunity to do.
Yeah, it's a totally different realm. Like working with weight category sports, it's a totally different realm. There's a lot of information now and a lot of evidence and evidence-based practices of how to do these in a better way, and how to control weight without really influencing or impacting the health of the athletes. And a lot of studies and a lot of information, good information. And there are people who are doing an amazing work with changing the environment of how this is approached. Because you can see a lot of, how now energy deficiency is now such a big topic. So among girls and boys equally. And because some of these sports, you start very young cutting your weight, right? So since you're adolescent, you're doing this and you're like fluctuating your weight, and how it affects in your development, your bone development, your metabolism per se, menstruation in girls, the whole red movement, and yes, but there are ways to make these correctly and to make these safe and healthy for athletes. It's just a lot of change in mindset to athletes and coaches that are been doing these maybe a little bit archaic for a lot of years. But and in the Olympic, I mean, professional boxing is different from the amateur boxing, but it's the one in the Olympic cycle. So it's only 3 rounds and it's shorter. So it's way more explosive than the professional one.
That's what I was going to ask. If it's 3 rounds, they just must be going crazy in those 3 rounds.
Yep. I think it's 3 minutes. I should know these, but I think is it 3 minutes rounds? But yes.
Okay. So then let me ask you, because you mentioned, it might be getting people to buy in and approaching everyone sort of differently, especially if there's some resistance from like the athlete standpoint, but even from like the coaching standpoint. What are some things or practices or approaches that you sort of take when trying to get potentially resistant individuals, again, like athletes or coaches or training staff, in terms of, getting them to adopt better practices? Is this something where you show them the data, like here's a research paper? Is it, I've worked with such and such athlete with success? Like what's your sort of your approach? And I know it's gonna vary, but how do you sort of approach that and get that buy-in, like you mentioned?
I think I have an advantage because I was an athlete. And because I was an athlete, there's a lot of buy-in there because I understand. And because I tell them, I've been in your shoes, I walked in your shoes, I know what it's like to be an athlete in terms of commitment, discipline, stress, anxiety, hunger, you name it, injuries, you name it. I've been there. So we talk the same language. And from there on, you get them a little bit softer, because it's not like you're coming really as an outsider, like, and I've been here and I know where you're coming to. And even when an athlete is very young and it's going to be their first time in some of these games, the environment in these games, it's amazing. And especially in the big ones, because you're going to be in a village, because you're going to be with all these different other athletes from all these different disciplines besides yours, because you're going to be in a cool place all together at the same time. There's a lot of hot people walking around, there's a lot of activities, there's a lot of distractions. So even talking with them about what you're going to be seeing and to be able to stay focused, so that's usually, it makes it easier for me to come in when you tell them that you've been in these for such a long time. Then, as you mentioned, it's, for me, what it really worked too is not coming in and telling them, this is me and this is where I come from and this is what I do. It's more about talking and about starting this conversation when I ask them about their sport. When you're in a sport, you're so in love with your sport that just talking about your sport, it gets even like the sparks in your eyes, right? So it's getting into a conversation when you are the one showing me the way. You are the one who are important. You are the one who are gonna provide me with the information that I need. You are the one who it's pointing me the way to show me your needs. You're explaining to me the sport and all these different aspects. So not coming as, I'm better than you, I'm here to help. It's coming from below and building up the relationship from all these conversations. And you are the one who are important here. Let me, or tell me how I can help. It's not coming with answers, it's coming like with questions and how to build my way in. And even if from there I can see that, yes, please, I have these, please help me with these, and I have these athletes and let's do this. Okay, cool. I have a lot of space here to work. Or I just need you to show these athletes, do these, and okay, that's gonna be my part, that's gonna be my role. If during that time you see that I could be of assistance in any other space, then great, and we build it up from there. So that's kind of like my approach too. I'm not like, look all these different athletes that I've worked with, or look all these things that I've done. I'm not like, I don't like that part of like being like a whole show up. But for some athletes that maybe like, hey, I've heard you did X and Y with this athlete, or that you work with these Olympic athletes, or and then we again start the conversation from there. I've always been very big towards you moving in to where they are, again, to see their practices, to get inside of their environment. That would be like maybe my, even like an advice to aspiring dietitians.
Cool. Yeah. That's one of those things that you can't really get in a classroom or in a class, but it's working with different individuals. Yeah. Like I've not worked with athletes, but I've been a personal trainer for like almost 15 years. And right now, I'm working with older adults, and I always tell students, like, we could talk about it, like what the textbook says, we could talk about a research paper and the data, but the real life is not like a textbook. And you got to be able to use that background information, but use it as like a tool to navigate forward with each individual.
Yeah. In here you have coaches who are really prepared, and they do love the theory and do love the facts and the numbers, and will even challenge you about different I don't know, strategies or things that are being used in the updated scientific world, that when you get to face them with facts and you show them that you know, then they like lower their I don't know, their walls, and then you're in. But there are some where not interesting at all about theory, science, numbers, facts. I don't care. And again, it's our responsibility as professionals to everything that you do or everything that I do. Of course, I try to be very science-based, and it's how to translate that very complicated textbook into the easiest way to explain it to them. Or there are some ways, very empirical, that when you go to the world and you see that it's been working, why fixing something that is not broken if it works for them? It's just you support them and you see how to make it better with some of your science, but you question like, how is this even working? And it does.
Right. Yeah. The research is the research, the science is the science, and like the data are the data, but it's like the application is more of an art.
Yeah.
And like you say, taking that and then knowing how to best translate that in an effective way. Yeah. And then some cases, like you mentioned, like someone's doing something and like, this shouldn't even make sense, but it's working, you know? Yeah. And at that point it's like, well, we just want them to perform.
You
so
have to be flexible.
Right.
I think. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I do want to get into just a little bit of the nutrition stuff.
Sure.
I know we talked a lot about like the professional aspect, and that I think that's really interesting, and I hope people like find that interesting, get some use out of it. But just briefly, let's talk about fueling performance, fueling athletes just with carbohydrate. And at least over here in the US, it's been like decades now where the idea of low carbohydrate diets are better for health or better for body composition, which are two different things from athletic performance. But then even, there's some things out there that is better for athletic performance. And, sure, there might be some types of activities that might be able to get away with a lower carbohydrate diet. But when it comes to athletic performance, like pretty much with almost every type of athlete, like you need to get enough carbohydrates. And just from a fueling standpoint, maybe you can talk just a little bit about like the importance of carbohydrates, their use, and how you approach that with athletes.
Yes. I'm the carb queen, right? I am totally supportive of carbs. And I think it's because of the population that I work with. And we can see it from two different standpoints. First, we need to go back always to the basics, right? To physiology and exercise physiology. And with all the different energy systems and all the different energy substrates the body can use, we can remember that our body fuels from the macronutrients. So that's protein, fats, and carbohydrates, but they work very differently. So proteins and amino acids per se are not the best at giving us ATP or creating ATP, so energy. We want them really to be able to work as building blocks. Then we have carbs and fats as the main fuels. But then what really makes a difference in what we're using is the intensity of the exercise. So when we work at very intense exercise and our oxygen is limited because of how hard we're working, carbohydrates are going to be the best fuel because of how, what's like the word? It's faster. So they are faster in going through all the different parts of the different, that's more your side, but all the different energy systems, right? So when we're working with these athletes and we're working with them at their, if you want to work to your best at the highest intensity, you're going to be using carbs as fuel. And again, if we move across the spectrum of the intensity, at lower intensity, we can use fats because it takes longer and it's going to be available. And we have lots of fat to store. Even if you're like the leanest person in the world, you're going to be having a lot of fat stored. But if you're going to be training at your top intensity, then again, fats not the best fuel. They take longer in creating all these ATP, so you need carbs. And that's just pure basic exercise physiology. But we move then to our second point, that the sources of carbohydrates are very different. We can have carbohydrates in sugar, in jams. We can have carbohydrates in beans, in rice, in pasta. You can have carbohydrates in vegetables like lettuce, like tomato. All of these are carbohydrate sources. So there's a lot of noise around carbohydrates. And I think you always have to understand your context and where are you coming from. So if you're a healthy person working at the gym, or you're an elite athlete, you're a road cyclist, that it's going to be spending 4 or 5 hours at the top of your intensity for 15 days, you're a very different person, a very different context. And that's where the different approach on carbohydrates is going to come. So I really like a concept from some people in the UK, that it's the fuel for the work required. So as an athlete, you have to work for the fuel, you have to work for the workload that you're required, right? So yes, as an athlete and an elite athlete, at your max intensity, again, you'll be needing carbs mostly all the time, but not every day, every moment. Because even if we have these road cyclists, they're not going to be training every day at their max intensity, and not every day is going to be 5-6 hours in training. Some days are going to be just an hour just rolling through the street. Some days are going to be having some high intensity. Some of them is going to be like a long run. And you always have to fuel according the work that you are doing and the training. So yes, it's a lot of carbs and you need a lot of carbs, but it's not high carb every day, every single day, and every single meal. You have to periodize that carbohydrate consumption according to how your training is periodized as well. And according to the season or the stage of your preparation, if you're moving towards a competition, then maybe, of course, we need a lot of carbs because you're preparing your body to have enough fuel. But if you are off season or at some specific point of your season, maybe that very intense feeling is not going to be required. In here, and again, talking about the different types of carbohydrates that I mentioned before, like sugars are friends, and we need sugars, and we need sugar at specific times where your digestion time is going to be limited, or you are performing your exercise and you're going to be consuming, then the type of carbohydrates that we want are like simple refined sugars, because strategically they're going to be so easily digested and moving towards your blood that it's going to be flowing towards your muscles and your brain that you need them. And yes, in these moments we want that, but the rest of the day that you're not working out, then please add your fiber and your whole grains and all these different foods more towards what it's needed as a healthy standpoint. So talking about carbohydrates, we could see it here and have a whole podcast series just about carbohydrates. But yes, I think what the audience need to understand is that out of general exercise physiology and fueling, and if you want to compete at your best, that's what's needed. In the sports nutrition realm, there's also, different strategies where having these periodizing your carb ingestion, and especially in endurance sports, where you can use these different strategies, having low carb training sessions or training days, specifically around not so high intensity training sessions that have been shown to have some improvements in more the metabolic side of how your mitochondria work, and more the functional side of muscles and so. But just for like the general consensus, carbs are needed, and carbs are best friend. And if you're going to perform at your highest, you need carbs, period.
Yeah, that I like how you put all that. And when I talk to students about it, and again, for the most part, it's not coming from an athletic standpoint, but if you are working with an athlete, which some students might want to do, it's like, what was the phrase that you said? You got to fuel the work?
Fuel for the work required.
Fuel for the work required. Yeah. So if you're doing something that is of high intensity, either kind of shorter duration where you're using glycolysis, or if you're doing something aerobic but higher intensity, like you need carbohydrate, like you mentioned, it's faster, right? You can generate ATP at a faster rate. So if you want to perform at a higher intensity, you need more ATP. So you need a substrate that can generate ATP fast. And if you don't got the glycogen, if you don't got the carbohydrate, when you go to hit the gas, you ain't going to go, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yes, yep. And now that you said that, we have to remember that our carbohydrate storage in the body is limited. So glycogen in muscles and glycogen in the liver. So there are some sports where that glycogen is going to be depleted, or it's going to be emptied during practice. And that's why we need all these exogenous carbohydrates, because of to be able to maintain both and to work with both, and to save some of the glycogen that you are having stored, and to be able to add more because of how intense and how long this event is going to be, especially the endurance event.
Right. And then, kind of off of that, the post-exercise carbohydrate, like from an athletic standpoint, is super important, because post-exercise or post-training or post-performance, like your muscles are just way more sensitive to assimilating glycogen, right? So the glycogen synthesis rate is much higher. So if you're trying to maximize replenishment of glycogen for the next training session, the next bout, or the next game, performance, whatever it is, you want to get carbohydrate within, the first, hour, 2 hours, or right after, right? To capitalize on that. Yeah. Carbohydrates
go around like before, during, and after it's needed. And I can send you, there is actually, it's a paper from the Joe Moore Liverpool University in the UK. Graham Close and James Morton are the ones who have written some of these fuel for the work required, and how to periodize carbs around training according to your training during the week. And even like the athlete split. I don't know if you're familiar, because I know this concept comes from the US. Even the athlete splits, it's all about these periodization in fueling for the work required, because you have the 3 plates. You have a light, medium, and high effort or intense day, and you have the proportions of your protein, your, let's say, vegetables and carbs, and how you open or close the sections in your plate according to your intensity of effort. So if you had a hard training day, it's almost like half of your plate is going to be carbohydrates. But if you had a light day, then it's like a third of your plate is going to be carbs. So it's that same concept that you don't need a lot of carbs all the time, every day, at every single moment, because it's just feel as, or just think about it as fuel. So not every day you're fueling your car, for example, with the same, or even charging your phone at the same speed, or you're not using the battery at the same speed, so you don't have to be charging as often. It's the same thing, but you need them because it's your fuel.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and I'll put an image of the athlete's plate on here. Yeah. Okay. Last one. Supplements. As a
Another
sports
podcast series.
Yeah. So you can go into it as much or as little as you want. But your thoughts on supplements, your approach to supplements, and are there any that you recommend often or in general?
Again, working for the Olympic cycle, because how control you have in the doping area, or how each and every sport or series of sports, or I know the NFL has a different approach in supplements, how the NCAA has a different approach to supplements, the Olympic setting has a different approach, like rules, right? And you have to follow these rules, and it's very controlled. And I think as a dietitian, you have to work with them, and you have to understand that they are part of the sport world, and it's part of the job that you have to do. Because of how the supplement industry it's created and it's managed, it's very appealing to athletes. So you're always going to have to be dealing with supplements conversations. We do need to understand that it's a tricky environment. It's a tricky market. You have to be smart, and you have to be one step ahead, because not every supplement it's what they say it is. And especially in sports where there are going to be control and there are going to be doping tests, you cannot just go to any store and buy whatever. So in here, the approach as a dietitian is food first, yes, and make the most out of food. And that's the whole concept that it's like a pyramid, right? Then first you have like the basic, and you need to cover basic of healthy eating. Then you have in the second stage all the different sports nutritional strategies. And when you're working with that pyramid, and this is stable and very solid, then in the very tip, you can work maybe with some supplements. But the first thing that we need to know is that they're not magic. They won't do what you're not doing in training. And then there's the Australian people came up with the classification system, which is, I think, what most of us follow. It's 4 groups. It's an A, B, C, D system, where you have in group A all the different supplements that have sufficient evidence in terms of the sports performance, in terms of validity, in terms of dosage, in terms of everything. Because supplements need to be taken care of as the medicines. You have to take them at some specific time, dose, moment, etc. They should be considered like this. They cannot be taken lightly. So in those who really work and they have this solid evidence, we even have the sports drink and carbohydrates and energy gels and gummies and all these, because they are used towards improving performance. And there's also a very nice paper from the same group that I'll share with you again, but it's this concept of food first, but not food always, because there are some specific situations in sport where you really need a supplement. If you find an athlete who's deficient in iron, you have to supplement them, of course, to be able to have them stable and be able to perform at their best. If you have an athlete who's traveling to a foreign country and you do not have any idea how the food is going to be, then you can provide some multivitamins, you can have some liquid meals and things like that to be able to make sure that they're going to be receiving all the different nutrients that they need. If you have a cyclist, again, and you need them to really consume the amount of calories they need when they're having these stage competitions. Of course, you'll be needing sports drinks, gels, all these confectionery. You'll be needing probably some shakes or stuff to be able to really maximize all that calories that they're consuming. So there are specific situations in sports where you definitely need to rely on supplements. So I think as a dietitian, you cannot be in a standpoint where you're saying like, no, just food. No, you have to be able to understand the different situations, be flexible, and know where really to use them. Favorite ones, or the ones that are mostly used besides carbohydrates, and that's again sports drinks and gels, even powders like maltodextrin and stuff for energy purposes and for different hydration protocols or competition protocols. Protein powders as well are very useful and are very practical to be able to fulfill all the protein needs or specific moments where I don't know, if you have a student athlete and they have to be walking around, they don't own a car, and they have to be walking with their backpack, the university backpack, and the training backpack. Of course, it's easier for them to just carry like a Ziploc bag with the powder and not like a whole chicken breast the whole day across college, right? Creatine is also one of my favorites or mainly used. But here's another thing about supplements. You really need to understand what the purpose of the supplement is, what's the function in the body, and if your sport is really going to take an advantage of the supplement or not. Because if you're going to be a bowler or if you're going to be a marathon runner, I won't be recommending creatine for you. But if you're a volleyball player or if you're a sprinter, yes. Again, going into the basics of exercise physiology, understanding plus for creatine, why we need them, and what's the point of having that. Or if you want to develop some muscle mass in an athlete. What else? I think that's going to be my top three.
La cafeína.
Oh, caffeine. Personal favorite. Yes, that one too. And again, is one of the supplements that it's in group A, so that it has enough evidence that it works with most of sports. With caffeine, it's again, with supplements, you always have to understand a lot of things around it. So with caffeine, we do have to understand, again, the basic. Caffeine, it's like an energy boost, but it's not fuel. Like we said about the macronutrients, it's going to go to activate your central nervous system, and then you're going to be feeling more energized. You don't really have a fuel, but you do feel energized. So with caffeine, we have to be very careful how to use it, because we could be masking some habits that they're not taking care of. So if you're not sleeping correctly, if you're not feeling correctly, you shouldn't be using caffeine. You should be taking care of these two first before using caffeine, and knowing that you're using caffeine as the performance enhancer, not solving things that you're not taking care of in your life. And we do need to remember too that each one of us metabolizes caffeine at different speeds, and we need to try different doses and be very careful about the approach with caffeine. But it's definitely one that I do like, that I do use. now we know that it's not only for before starting a competition or before practice, that it can be taken to during the event to be able to have that gain, that you have to be, again, strategic about when you're going to be consuming these because of digestion and stuff, how much time it's going to be peaking in your blood to have the effect. Now we have different vehicles because it's not only through energy drinks or through a drink, you have capsules, or my personal favorite is through bubblegum. And it's known now too that you have receptors in your mouth that it's faster the effect of the caffeine. Again, and probably I should not be merchandising these, but again, personal favorite. And so yeah, top four.
My parents went to Costa Rica it was a while ago now, but they brought back some Costa Rican coffee beans, and it was bomb.
It's good. It's good. Our coffee is good. Our coffee and the Colombian people, it's good. So yes, for us, caffeine in coffee, it's a big thing because we're a coffee country and it's very good. You should all come to Costa Rica and try our coffee.
Better than Starbucks.
Costa Rica. Way better than Starbucks. Do you know that even Starbucks has some lands here in like a whole lab? Because of how good our coffee is, they have some properties in here, and they have a whole station. We have Starbucks station here in the country, and yeah,
their exploitation knows no bounds. It's international. Yeah. Okay, last question.
Sure.
So it's a short one, but it's an important one. ¿Conoces Tapatio? No, okay, un momento. I just ran out, and normally it's not this one, it's a giant one, but I ran out, and this one's almost out too. Yeah, no, it's
no.
Yeah, okay. So no Tapatio in Costa Rica. They don't have it in
Tapatio in Costa Rica.
Okay.
We're not so eager about Chile as the Mexicans. And here, what is the most typical, it's for people to do like their own chileras, are called. So it's like you do your own thing in your house, and it's like a mixture of chilies and onions and things like that with like vinegar. So you do your little own thing, or your own, I don't know, house preparation. And even when you go to different restaurants and things like that, or even like my grandma used to do a very good one, chilera. Yeah.
Is it hot?
It's not as hot as the Mexicans. It's more, I think it's mild.
My uncle says, no está llorando, no es ven.
Yeah, no, you're not going to get to tears. No vas a llorar con este chile.
Okay. Well, hey, I really appreciate the time and the conversation. Sure. Muchísimas gracias por esta conversación. Y otra vez, un día vamos a hacer una conversación en español. Es mi deseo. ¿Cuándo? No sé, pero un día.
Perfecto.
Oramos por eso.
Estaré lista. Vos me decís ya.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Appreciate the time. Appreciate your insights and experience, and hopefully people get something out of it. That was one of the things that, again, being able to go down to Colombia in Barranquilla last year and meet, you and Catalina and Johanna, and of course Maria Clara and Andres and all of them. Appreciated the friendship that we all sort of established. So appreciate it.
Yeah, it's also the cool part about this whole thing, and it's one of the things that I've also liked the most about being a dietitian when you go to these different competitions, because you're always competing and there's always this stress and tension, but I've known and I've got to meet a lot of dietitians from other teams, and how we work together. At some point, we help each other, and how we build a community in all these very stressful environments. It's really nice. Like in the last Pan American Games that I went to in Lima, in Peru, before COVID, so 2019, we did like a very nice group. You know, the Canadian, the US, the Guatemala, the Puerto Rican dietitian. We were all having, and it was more people. And then during the Olympics, it's also known too when you get to talk and even improve the conditions in the Pan American Games. We worked together in the village with the food provider, and we asked for some improvements in the service, and they were very open. So it's really nice in the whole sports community to not see each other as enemies or like competition, but coming together and work together. And at the end of the day, each one of us has very different characteristics in our country, so it's nice to share, to be heard, seen, and yeah. So thank you for doing these, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, and then even just like, you know, I mean, I'm in California. There's a lot of Mexicans in California, and just seeing different brown people and they're not Mexican, it's like, wait a minute, I'm a little confused here, but yeah. Okay. Well, hey, thanks again.
Thank you.
Looking forward to getting this up, and looking forward to talk to you again in the future, or see you at a conference somewhere.
Sure. More than happy to. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, that's it for the episodio especial. Mejor de Sábado Gigante. ¿Puedes bailar o cantar?
Okay, no, tal vez hoy no.
No? Okay. El próximo episodio. Yeah.
Okay. I'll be ready.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again.
Thank you. Bye.
You ever seen Sábado Gigante? Sábado Gigante! That's the most beautiful shit in the world. They got a million things going on at once. Be like, what the fuck is this? You see a little girl jumping rope and a bitch in a bikini. Sábado Gigante!